Hello everyone, thank you again for clicking on one of my videos. I hope you find it informative and it helps you make a decision on this watch or just any watch really. We're going to be talking today about the Longines Hydroconquest GMT. I've had this for a few months now, wearing it mostly at work, a little bit off work, but I bought it as kind of an on-duty backup. So we'll get into things I like, things I don't like, why I bought the watch, and then also what this piece has taught me about more expensive watches, specifically, try and get this thing to focus, specifically the Submariner, which is, everyone compares it to it. I hate that I'm doing it too, but it's kind of unavoidable, and I don't know. We'll see if I have something interesting to say about it. So I bought this watch a few months ago. I can't remember the date, honestly, as a backup to my Omega, which I bought specifically as a duty watch. I'm a full-time firefighter EMT, a little bit more than full-time because I also work per diem on my days off from the fire department. And yeah, I just always wanted, kind of like once I got hired, I liked the idea of having a dedicated work watch, just as to have something special, and maybe and something to pass down to my kids and say, hey, this is, I wore this throughout my career. So that was I went through a couple watches before landing on this. And well, the whole duty watch thing is an even longer story, which we'll skip. But basically, I had got it into my head that I wanted to change the bezel. So it's maybe a little hard to see in this lighting, but this is the 225580. And the original bezel was that polished metal one. So the first thing I thought I could do was polish the bezel a little bit because it was a little scratched. And as these things often go, I wound up making it worse. So then I was like, well, I've seen some pictures of people who put the aluminum blue bezel insert in. I was like, all right, well, that's really cool. Let me give that a shot. But of course, I was too cheap to buy the bezel removal tool and was trying to do it in other ways. And I bent this shit out of the original bezel before I could even get the insert out and swap it out. So I wound up having to get a new bezel to the tune of way too much money. Popped out the silver insert because I couldn't find just the bezel by itself. Pop out the silver insert, glue this one on, and just while that was all happening, I was very frustrated because I didn't have, the only other watch I really had at that time was my Christopher Ward 12, which is a great watch. And there's no reason you can't really wear it on duty. But for me, I use the timing bezel a lot for various reasons, especially on the ambulance. So not having, excuse me, a little frog in my throat there. So not having that was just a big bummer for me. So I was like, all right, so maybe, what is out there? What could I use as kind of a backup duty watch that I would also wear off duty, and yeah, just kind of exploring some different things. I had by this time I'd had a couple of collar style GMTs, one from Oris, one from Zodiac. There might have been another, I just can't remember that passed through my life. I can't remember what it might have been though. So I was in my head, I've got some international travel planned this year. So I was like, let me see if I can find something with a flyer GMT with a dive bezel, which turned out to be really, really hard. So many, first off, finding a flyer GMT at a certain price point is very hard. Nothing against callers, they have a legitimate function, but I'd had a couple of them and it's not what I wanted anymore. But I also wasn't, getting a Flyer GMT with like a Miyota 9075. Those are great watches. The Notice Contrail is one of my favorites. I'd love to get one of those, but it has a GMT bezel, not a 60-minute bezel. And for a duty watch, I really was not willing to give up the 60-minute bezel. So I was kind of looking at stuff from Mido, Jack Mason, and maybe Oris. I think maybe makes a Flyer GMT with a 60-minute bezel. But between just the aesthetics and then size, getting one in a good size was difficult. I think the Midos and the Jack Masons were, or might have been a little big for me, or maybe just the Midos I think were on the bigger side. Jack Mason, I was just having a hard time finding like concrete reviews on it, and honestly, it's just a brand that it didn't really get my motor running, even as pretty as the watches are. Then I remembered this watch. I'd seen this years before and just kind of filed it in the back of my head, and I was like, oh man, what about the Longines GMT? So I was looking at it and I was like, man, these on Joma Shop, like, you know what, these things are pretty reasonably priced. And I was about to pull the trigger on the blue one because blue, I have in my life, I've had way too many blue watches. Blue is kind of like my power color. It's just I'll buy anything with a blue dial, especially if it's a textured blue dial. So I was very, very close to pulling the trigger on the blue one when on eBay I found this. I don't want to call it used because it still had some of the plastic and whatnot on it, so I'll call it open box for a few $100 less than what Joma Shop was selling them for. It's like, man, I don't know, but black. I was like, do I really want a black diver? It's not really my thing. So I went over to the D-Lugs visualizer. You can punch in. They've got thousands of watches, and you can kind of get an idea of what the watches look like on straps. And the moment I saw this on Deluxe paired with rendering with an orange rubber strap, I was like, oh man, that's the jam, and I bought it. And we'll check out the orange rubber in a second here. So that's why I bought it. We'll get rid of the thing, start off and get out of the way with the things that I don't like about it, and then we can end on a positive note, as I usually do with these reviews. Things I don't like. There are some sharp edges on the back side of the case, like right here, and then kind of the etch, some of this etching is pretty sharp. Whether or not that's a mark of low quality, high quality, I can't say. I had a Suggest chronograph, which is a really cool watch, but it had a lot of sharp edges. And I was like, that was, but then, compared to like some other watches I'd handled, like the Rolex Submariner, like this thing, there's no sharp edges at all on the watch head or the bracelet. So I was kind of, I'm still a little turned off by the sharp edges. There's none on the bracelet though, which is great. So like when you're actually wearing the watch, you really don't feel any of the sharpness. I'm frankly just nitpicking. For the price, having split pins in the bracelet is kind of a letdown. I don't know what it costs to put screw links in there. If Brigade can do it for $1,100, if Suggest can do it for $350, like why can't Longines do it at $2,250? I just knocked my camera now. So yeah, the split pins are kind of a letdown. I had a real hard time sizing this bracelet. But it is something you only have to put up with once unless you gain or lose a bunch of weight. So, that is what it is. The bracelet itself, and so we'll get my Omega up here in comparison. The bracelet, for how hefty the watch head is, the bracelet is a little thin and light. Because, so you can see like, try and get it to focus here. Of course, now I have both my hands, so I can't refocus it manually. the Longines is a much chunkier watch than the Omega, both in kind of overall volume and especially thickness. So, but the bracelet is a lot thinner than the Omega bracelet, and it's a lot flatter. So it just feels because it doesn't have these nice oval links. It feels even thinner than it might otherwise would if it had some rounded links. But yeah, you can see how like razor thin that is compared to the watch head. Now that does, certainly does cut down on the weight. Like, wearing it, it's not like wearing a brick. And maybe if the bracelet was thicker, it would just be too much. So I can't really, I don't know if that's a real complaint or not, but aesthetically and feel, it's just a little incongruous compared to my Seamaster. Now again, compared to the Seamaster, this might be an unfair comparison because this watch is so damn good. The lume on the Longines is not spectacular. Of course, now I'm sitting down, I forgot to bring my UV light out. But like when I hit both of these with the UV at night, this dies a lot quicker than this. Now at 2 a.m., when I wake up in the middle of the night for no reason, I can still read this. This is still perfectly legible. But it's really not on the same level as this thing, as the old Omega. Is that a difference in the quality of the lume? Is it just that the Omega has physically more lume on the dial? I don't know. But again, considering that I paid pretty much the same amount of money for both of these watches, the lume on this was a bit of a letdown because I was really used to my Omega. The clasp is, well, I do like this, this Longines printing on the clasp, but it's a little, it can get stuck. So like here, I'm pushing the pins and it's not coming off. It's almost like it gets hung up a little bit on the inside, and even if I'm just casually taking it on and off, like I sometimes have to get it either lined. Sometimes it just slips right off, but sometimes I have to give it a little bit of a tug if I'm not quite aligned perfectly. And again, compared to the Omega at the similar money, I was just kind of like, the clasp is. The clasp release, sorry, I'm itching my eye. I've got a horrific sty that hurts and itches. But yeah, just the clasp action is a little, because it gets stuck there sometimes. But it feels good. It's it's a nice milled clasp, and the micro adjust is halfway decent. It doesn't give you a ton of room to play with, but it's enough to where I size it so where like either fully in or maybe sometimes like one click out is where I'll wear it, and then if I need to punch it out all the way, then I've got that flexibility. It's my only watch with an on-the-fly micro adjust, and I do like it, and I do use it pretty frequently. Continuing with the bracelet, there's no half links, and for me, maybe with the micro adjust, that's not as big of a deal. And stylistically, I don't know how you would do half links on an H-link bracelet, but not having them is kind of a bummer, especially when you have, like me, my wrists are about 6.5 inches, and they're kind of flat, and they're like flat and narrow. So this is they're not. It's very much an elongated oval shape. My wrist. So getting a good fit has been tricky for me, and I wouldn't mind a half link on here. Last complaint, it took me a while to kind of figure this out, but sometimes the bezel feels a little tinny. I don't know, just sometimes maybe if you're rotating it quickly, sometimes it feels like it's made out of recycled soda cans. This one's a little bit smoother, even with an aftermarket bezel. I think I kind of like this one a little bit better still. This one, I don't know. It's just, and there's kind of a, not a, I mean, there's a noticeable amount of back play in the bezel. Yeah, and just sometimes I do it, I work in the bezel, I'm just like, it's kind of just eh. Now, all that being said, I'm ragging on the watch. I've been ragging on the watch for a while, but overall, I really love this thing. In the past, I've not really cared for female end links. I've just found that they make the watch feel cheap. But on this one, they work really well. Let me see if I can put this on just to kind of make some of the point about it. So you can see on my, small, medium, average wrists, it sits pretty well. It's like it is kind of right on the edge of what might be too big from a lug to lug standpoint. But the female end links do make it very comfortable, and I think that it does shrink, the female end links do shrink the feeling and look of the lug to lug, and by allowing that bracelet to hang a little bit. Because if it, when you see no bracelet, it's like, okay, that's a little big. But when you see a little bit of bracelet, it's like, okay, that works. Man, this thing is not focusing well for me today. Yeah. So normally I don't like female end links. On this, it's great. Also, they don't, some on other female end links, they'll like recess behind the shoulders of the case. But here, when we fold it back, it's even, versus kind of leaving like it would, versus leaving like a little H here. Having that stay flat makes it still feel and look good. I don't know if this is all of them, but on mine, the case back lines up perfectly, and my OCD is very happy about that. It's a great size. If they made a 40 or a 39, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. But they don't, so here we are at 41. It does have a very commanding wrist presence. I don't know how to explain. Like it wears on the big side. You definitely notice it, and it's fairly thick. It's very broad, and it just kind of, and the volume of the watch. It doesn't really thin out or taper down from end to end. So like maybe the Omega does. It has a lot of wrist presence, and it's a very commanding watch. And of course, it reminds me of a Submariner. It wears very similarly to the current Submariner. This is a very value-oriented and feature-rich watch, and what I mean by that, so we're getting a Flyer GMT. We're getting anti-magnetism. It's not, I can't remember how much it is, but I think it's got a silicone hairspring, and a 72-hour power reserve from a Swiss company with a ton of heritage, and on-the-fly adjustment, all for Joma Shop, open box used, call it $22.50. That's a lot of watch for the money. It really is. I know I've nitpicked, or I haven't, but some people nitpick about all the shapes on the dial, like, oh, we've got circles, we've got bars, we've got triangles, trapezoids. It's like, but you know what? And my desktop is going to sleep. I have seen some renderings of it looking, of it without the circles, and it does look very good. People nitpick about all the different shapes, and it might, you could argue that it would look better with all bars and no circles here. But you know what? Guess what? The Rolex Submariner has circles around, circles where there would be bars, bars where there would be circles. The Submariner has a big ass triangle up at 12. It has a Mercedes hand. Um, the Sub has just as much geometric variety as this thing does, and nobody cares. But then people go after this watch. It's like it's the same. It's got the same variety of shapes and the same shapes, just kind of in the opposite places. Be quiet, speaker. And I've never been a fan of the Mercedes hand anyways. I don't know. I don't know what it is. It just looks weird. I much prefer the snowflake, or this trapezoid, this, this shape of the hour hand here. And then, lastly, the bracelet does have a very solid and silky feel. These old Omega bracelets have set a very high bar for me. And cause just to me, this is what a bracelet should feel like. I really like these, and this has a very similar feel. I think compared to a 3-link, the H links do have a lot of articulation. And so these 3 links are very small, so there's a lot of, so like here, okay, actually, well, so that's about as tight a circle as you can get here. But on the H link, you can fold that right in half, no matter what. So kind of, along the lines of, a Jubilee. Everyone loves how a Jubilee fits and drapes, because of those small links, or the new Omega Speedmaster bracelet. This is a very similar wearing quality, with the very fine articulation there. Just some other thoughts about this. I know I nitpicked a couple of things, but I really think that the money was, Longines spent the money on the movement in favor of other elements. I imagine that a Swiss Flyer anti-magnetic movement with 72 hours of power reserve is probably not cheap, from a manufacturing standpoint. So if all of my nitpicks were corrected, and it still had this movement, it would, maybe it'd be a $4,000 or $5,000 watch, which is, then puts it right in the firing line of Tudor. Yeah. So now the Rolex, and so yeah, the obvious comparison everyone's making is the Rolex Submariner, and I get it. There's good reason for making that comparison. What this watch taught me about the Sub, so for years I had such a hard on for the 126-710, but when the the Starbucks as well. But when the reality of the authorized dealer games and the secondary pricing sunk in, I felt really discouraged and defeated and a little angry just at the whole situation. Then the MSRPs of Rolex kept climbing. And it was just like, all right, you know what? This is 12 grand for a steel sports watch. I just didn't see the value anymore. Now that I've had this watch for a while, I can honestly say, I don't think I'm ever going to buy a 126-710 or the Submariner. Maybe maybe a solid gold version, but that's a totally different story. As far as steel is concerned, this is the watch for me. The Longines, this watch has so much to offer. Again, we've got I've harped on it a little bit. The 72-hour power reserve. You've got great accuracy, a Flyer GMT, a ceramic bezel, on-the-fly micro adjust, anti-magnetic, 300 meters of water resistance, all for under $3,000 from a brand with serious heritage. I really enjoy this watch and use it regularly. I wear it on duty, off duty, getting it wet, taking it swimming. I love it's so much fun, and it has allowed me to set my sights higher, in the Rolex world and even in the watch world. So like, because I've had this experience and like this watch so much, I'm like, you know what, maybe yeah, it's kind of opened my mind up to maybe looking at the gold Rolexes someday. But even just that, for 10 to 15 grand, there are so many amazing watches that you can get other than a GMT Master or the Submariner. The Omega Apollo 11 50th anniversary Speedmaster, a tremendous watch. The Vacheron 56, beautiful watch for 12 grand on a bracelet. Oh man, what else? Endless JLCs, the glass shoe to divers, or even the some of their regulator style watches. Um, there's just a lot when you kind of free yourself from Rolex. There's a lot of interesting, more I would say more interesting watches for $10,000 to $15,000. And then just buy this, because I think the experience of the Rolex Submariner is not worth the extra money. Steel, when we're talking steel. Now, all that being said, I can wrap up. The channel This Watch, That Watch said something recently, and I'm going to paraphrase it, that two watches can be equally beautiful, but not equally finished. I would say that this is equally beautiful, equally functional to watches that are a lot more money. And is it as well finished? No. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that this is as well finished as a $15,000 watch, but it is really, really nice. And if you're in the market for something like this, I can highly recommend it. And that's all I've got for you. Wow, we're 26 minutes in. Take care, people. Oh no, we got to do the orange strap. Sorry. Where is? All right, stand by. We're doing this live. Got my rubbish tool here. Of course, when the camera's rolling, I can't friggin' do it. All right, uno, dos. That one was easy. But yeah, check this out, folks, because we've got the orange on the dial and the GMT hand. So this just really brings, really brings it out. I mean, how cool is that? For a summer beach travel watch, or even, or certain, wearing it on duty. This is, it's just, that's, to me, this is so much fun. I love the colored straps, and the orange is just perfect. So yeah, drop a comment, let me know what you think. And I'm working on a script for a kind of like talking about all the different kinds of GMTs and my thoughts on them. We'll see if that comes out, but yeah, that's that. Have fun, everyone.